Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Some massive news coming out of this UCLA program is Chip Kelly leaving UCLA to be the next offensive coordinator for the Ohio State Buckeyes. And Dill, I can't say it's that surprising of news. And more importantly, I don't think there's a lot of UCLA fans crying in the streets about Chip Kelly leaving this program. And many of you guys know how I feel about Chip Kelly. I think he is a phenomenal X's and O's offensive-minded coach. But when you're the head coach at a program like UCLA, it's a hell of a lot more than just being a good football mind, right? You got to be able to recruit at the high school ranks, recruit in the transfer portal, meet with donors. And let's be honest, I mean, Chip Kelly that was not his strong suit. He is not a very charismatic relationship builder kind of guy. And you need to be like that to be a head coach for a program like UCLA. And so I think it represents an opportunity, quite frankly, for UCLA to hire a head coach that breathes some life into this program. And you'll see on Twitter, you'll see kind of the from the talking heads of college football saying, oh, who's going to take this UCLA job? I think it's a much better job than most people give it credit for. When you look at in the state of California, with the amount of high school talent there, going to the Big Ten, which is going to be really a super conference in the sport of college football, as I see it, this is a very attractive head coaching job. And what I'm looking for UCLA to do is hire a head coach that energizes the community and the program around UCLA. And so we're going to talk about a few coaching candidates. Would love to hear from you guys as well. And that's the best part about doing these. Again, if you guys have good candidates in the comment section that we don't put together, would love to hear from you guys. We'll chop it up in the comment section with you guys. And if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. This is going to be a storyline the fellas are talking about a lot for the next couple of days and weeks. Excited to get into it. Dill, I'm going to kick it off to you. You can give your take on Chip Kelly at UCLA, and we're going to dive into the coaching candidates here.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of said it perfectly. This represents an opportunity for UCLA to really vault themselves up and be competitive at the highest level, because there's no real reason that UCLA shouldn't be at that level at the end of the day. I think this is a big program, big time history, big time rich alumni base, obviously, and a lot of they have everything it takes. I think at the end of the day, they didn't have the right guy, though. You're right, just way too stubborn. And you've seen Chip Kelly now the last 3 or 4 stops as a head coach. You've seen the same issues kind of arise. Can't get along with anyone. Doesn't really treat people, it seems like, incredibly well at times. And when you do that, you can't recruit. You can't energize the donor base. When you can't do that, it's really, really hard to be a really good head coach.
I agree. You gotta have some charisma as a head coach. And I mean, not to be a jerk to Chip Kelly, this dude just had no charisma. Phenomenal offensive mind, very little charisma. I think that really led to the downfall at UCLA. I think it was clear this program was not going in the right direction. Dill, let's open it up for head coaching candidates. And I have the first name. If I was the AD and I'm putting together a hot board for head coaching candidates, Tony White's my first call. And you look at Tony White, very exciting coach, very good energy around him. But more importantly, he's been phenomenal at pretty much every stop he's been. Obviously, a UCLA alum, was phenomenal for that team. But more importantly, you look at his last couple stops, DC at Syracuse, did a phenomenal job. Goes to Nebraska, completely revamps that defense. And then was getting San Diego State wanted to interview him for a head coaching job. USC wanted him for their defensive coordinator. This was a very attractive name in the head coaching carousel a couple of weeks ago. He decides to stick with Nebraska, but Dill, UCLA head coaching opportunity. I think Tony White, for sure, would be interested, but more importantly, I think this would be a really good hire for UCLA.
Bring Tony White home. Obviously started his career as a GA at UCLA. I think when he was a player at UCLA, the coaches described him as an on-field coach as much as he was a player. So, again, no doubt about his football acumen. That's as good as anyone. And I think you're right. At the end of the day, if you can get someone who wants to be there and can bring the energy back and excite everyone around that program, that's what it's going to take for this UCLA team to kind of get back where they should be in terms of being ultra competitive with the Oregons, the USCs, and kind of being seen in the same light, because they should be at the end.
And you talk about okay, so you're losing an offensive mastermind, you're getting a defensive mastermind, and quite frankly, that's probably what you're coveting going into the Big Ten. You look about how you're going to win games in this conference. You got to win it with the stingy elite defense, and what Tony White was able to do at his first year at Nebraska was a phenomenal job. And I think he would make a lot of sense in terms of a young coach that kind of stimulates some energy around this program. Dill, I'm going to kick it to you for your next head coaching candidate for the UCLA Bruins.
I mean, one obvious one is Brian Hartline, and Brian Hartline kind of lost his status at Ohio State to an
extent. Kelly just took his job.
Yeah, no, 100%. Brian Hartline kind of went back to the wide receivers coach. But if Brian Hartline, if you can get him and bring in a really good defensive coordinator around him, I think you have a really potent combination of guys. Because Brian Hartline, I mean, he made it cool to play at Ohio State. Like, you think about what he's done for that wide receiver room alone. I mean, that's where everyone wants to be. I think he can make UCLA cool again in a place where guys feel like they want to go play and has that swagger. And that's what they need. I think that's a huge part of what they've missed. I think he immediately brings that in. And if he can hire a good defensive staff around him, I think he could be a really good fit at UCLA.
I absolutely love it. Like, you took pretty much all the words out of my mouth. What did I want for this next UCLA head coach? Young coach that can get it going on the recruiting trail, that has the charisma to get everyone kind of jacked up about this program. Brian Hartline would be that kind of hire. Now, is it a high risk, high reward hire? Absolutely, right? Brian Hartline's never been a head coach before. Guess what? Dan Lanning was a high risk, high reward hire. You're getting the high reward in Eugene. I think Brian Hartline offers that similar kind of narrative. And what I think it allows you to do with Brian Hartline is you're probably not giving him the biggest head coaching salary. And so what does that allow you to do? All right, Brian Hartline, you are an elite recruiter. We think that you can put a lot of energy into this program. We're going to surround you guys with a lot of experience at your coordinator spots. That's the one question you'd have for Brian Hartline. So yes, you bring in Brian Hartline, small head coaching salary, free up some funds to really hire an elite staff around him. You would get the recruiting going. I think you'd be able to hire a bang up staff. What did I ask for? Young, energetic coach. Brian Hartline would certainly check those boxes. Though another guy that I'll say that is a very similar kind of hire like Brian Hartline, Glenn Schumann at Georgia. I mean, this is a guy that, yes, he spent all his time in the Southeast at Alabama and Georgia. You had the same question marks about Dan Lanning, right? But what does Glenn Schumann and Dan Lanning kind of have in common? One, they're both on Georgia's defensive staff, but more importantly, Glenn Schumann's worked under Nick Saban. He's worked under Kirby Smart. You said it best. He's touched at pretty much every elite high school across the country on the recruiting trail. He's been an elite recruiter. Now, yes, he doesn't have a ton of head coaching experience, but he's been able to learn from the best. And I think Dan Lanning has done the same thing at Eugene, right? He's taken Kirby Smart's model, has implemented it in Eugene. They're obviously going in the right direction. I mean, I don't see why you couldn't have similar results with Glenn Schumann coming to UCLA.
And, I'll give you one more guy on the exciting hire list for me in terms of like those younger, more inexperienced, but kind of bring a high upside. Brennan Marion from UNLV. I mean, you've kind of seen him now work his way through college football. I mean, he started kind of low, if you will, in terms of like he didn't start at Alabama, but worked his way up to Texas, did an awesome job at Texas. The players loved him at Texas. He was the key recruiter on a bunch of those big-time wide receivers. And then he goes to UNLV, and you see, I mean, Barry Odom's not like an offensive guy. He's a defensive coach. So Brennan Marion on that offense was running the show, and he did an unbelievable job developing quarterbacks with Maava. I think, again, we're talking like these younger, exciting possible head coaches who've never been head coaches.
Yeah.
He's right up there on that list. I think, again, you kind of hear the way people talked about him at Texas, just brings that energy. I think he's.
I'm a huge fan of that. And yes, that's another big question mark one. But how fast he's worked his way up in the ranks of college football. Like, I believe he was a wide receiver coach at Hawaii, goes to Pitt, goes to Texas, now is an OC. I mean, this is a guy that has just worked his way up. You talk about rising young coaches. I mean, Brennan Marion, Brian Hartline, Glenn Schumann, all kind of in that bucket. A little different backgrounds, but all in that bucket. Another guy I would go to that might be a little bit more of a safe hire that I think would, again, be a really good hire for UCLA, Matt Campbell at Iowa State. This is a guy that you take a look at what he's done at Iowa State and how hard it is to win at that program with the amount of talent that he has. This is a guy who was two-time Big 12 Coach of the Year, has put Iowa State in a spot where they're consistently having a winning record, where they've really never done that in program history. I think Matt Campbell is looking at Iowa State right now. So, yeah, maybe I should have taken some of those head coaching jobs that I had chances at 2020. UCLA opens up. I think Matt Campbell, what did you not have with Chip Kelly? You didn't have good culture. You didn't really have much energy. Matt Campbell's that guy. Like, he brings that energy, brings that culture. Iowa State has one of the strongest cultures in all of college football. You put that in that UCLA program, I think that would be a really good fit.
Yeah, and I mean, probably my retort is I think Matt Campbell might just be too safe. Like, you kind of know he'll probably not mess it up and do a poor job there. But do you really think he's the guy to take that program up to like where maybe you want him to be?
If he could win, well, I'd say I see where you're coming from. If he could win 6, 7, 8, 9 games at Iowa State, what could he do at UCLA?
I mean, that is the question, and it's a fair question. It's not to say he doesn't provide as much like the upside you need, because again, he might be really good there. I just think, again, never really came up through those elite recruiting programs, never really had to do it at a high level. And also, just like you did kind of see him hit his head against it at Iowa State, and then it kind of trended down a little bit, frankly. I know he hasn't like hit it. He's not come down to earth in where Iowa State was, but you kind of did see him just start to be a middle Big 12 team, which, again, do you really want to take a guy who's been at Iowa State for that long? And it's just kind of, I mean, he hit that edge.
Well, I guess my argument would be he reached that is the ceiling for Iowa State. Like, you ain't winning more than.
They didn't sustain it there. They didn't sustain.
I think 6, 7 wins is quite frankly the ceiling at Iowa State. And I think he burst through it for a couple of years. I don't know if you could put Nick Saban at Iowa State and you're winning many games more than 6, 7 games a year. And so I get it. Like, so Matt Campbell probably a little less reward, but maybe also a little less risk because he's done it at Iowa State. You know what he can do as a head coach. Was a really good head coach at Toledo as well. Matt Campbell, a name to monitor. Though the last one that I think worth mentioning here is a coach that kind of get left out of the Power 5 conferences, the Core 4 conferences, whatever you want to call it, has taken over a program under a lot of turmoil, and I think has done a relatively good job, has a lot of good energy, a lot of good culture around this program. So Jake Dicker at Washington State, I think would be an interesting name to kick around as well.
Yeah, no, Jake Dicker, especially given what you kind of saw him do at Washington State when things kind of started falling apart with what Rolovich had going on. I thought he did do a really good job in that tough moment, keeping that team together, keeping the wheels on the track, and keeping that team really competitive in the big or Pac-12, I should say. Sorry, not Big Ten yet. But he did a really good job keeping that Pac-12 team together, being competitive in there. Again, there is that level of like, didn't really come up through those big time programs and doesn't really necessarily, never really been asked to recruit at a super high level, hence never really has. And that does, I don't want to say it scares me, but like that is the fundamental difference, I think, than getting like a first year guy from one of those power programs or a guy who's been through those power programs, because those guys learned what it takes to kind of compete at that high level. And that is, to me, what separates like the last two we just named from the first four. Like those first four know what they need to do at high level, at big time jobs. I think it is different Washington State versus Ohio State or Washington State versus Georgia. And again, Jake Dicker's a really good coach. I just don't know that he's the guy to take UCLA up to the next level.
All right, Jake Dicker, not on the crossing him off my board, Dale.
I want the four coordinators. I want a big time, exciting hire.
Right, I crossed Jake Dicker off. Jake Dicker's he's off the board. He's off the board. We're on Hartline, we're on Schumann, and we're on Tony White. I think I got Marion. And Marion from UNLV. Lock it up. All right, would love to hear from you guys, though. Again, this is a lot of names are going to get thrown out in the next couple days, weeks. We'll continue to talk about it. Appreciate all the support you guys have shown the boys. It really does mean a lot. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.